All right, welcome to Bereans at the Gate and our video blog for December 14th, 2017. You can probably tell that this is finals week because of the way that most of us are dressed. Dr. Heyman, of course, maintains his tie. Dr. Clausen looks like a refugee, I think is really the only appropriate term for whatever that is. But we are here and we are in good spirits as the season demands. So let's talk about Roy Moore. Seems that's all we want to talk about these days is Roy Moore and what's happened to him. Lost a little bit of a squeaker of an election. It was a tight one, I think, but he lost. So what should we read into this? Let's start with, I don't know, Bert. Let's start there. Bert, what do you think?
Well, I wouldn't say it was tight. I would say it was a landslide simply because of the way that Republicans normally, the way it normally comes out. Mm-hmm. So I think it's, in my mind, it's a marker that perhaps there's a little bit of sanity in our world, that maybe a little bit more of a return towards normalcy.
A little bit of sanity in the world?
A little bit of sanity. Right. Less chaos, less Bannonite chaos, yes.
So is this good for the Republicans, you think, moving forward, or bad? Mark, what do you think?
I think it's neutral. I think that people realize that this was liable to happen, even likely to happen. This was the race impossible to lose, but he lost it. He found a way to lose it, but for reasons that were pretty obvious. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think that it necessarily has to have any effect on Republicans at all. And if you try to break it down a little bit, you see who voted, who didn't vote. Massive turnout for certain groups of people in Alabama, massive stay-at-homes for other groups. That's not likely to happen in some of the other elections.
Yeah, evangelicals turned out over 80%, or at least I should say voted for him over 80%, but there was a big depression in their turnout, it seems like. Mm-hmm. So relatively few of them compared to previous elections. I mean, Jeff, I think some people have been a little bit tempted to maybe read more into this than what is actually true. Do you think this says anything about Donald Trump? Do you think this says anything about sort of our current politics? What do you think is a proper response?
Well, I have lots of miscellaneous thoughts, just real rapid fire. So first of all, I think part of this, and we're a pretty conservative group up here, and many of our audience are, I think we're wrestling with the fact that our candidates now, if you want to call them ours, because historically the evangelicals have supported the Republican candidates, we're now having to coming up to grips with the fact that many of our candidates are out and out scoundrels publicly, which is something the Democrats have long since reconciled. I mean, nobody is surprised or shocked when a Democrat candidate would do some of these particular things and have policies, at least have policies. I mean, we can go all the way back to the 70s. Jerry Studs was censored, but his base reelected immediately for having an affair with a young male page. But a Republican to do this, historically, that's been the death knell, and this is furthering that situation such that I think that we're seeing more of the Republicans saying, what does the Republican Party look like? Yeah. And so they don't, and so you even ask the question, what's this mean for the Republican Party? Yeah. And I would just encourage all of us, really, who cares about the Republican Party? It's really, what does this mean for our country? What does this mean for evangelical concerns in government? So I think part of this is us getting used to what this normal, as we've defined, overall corporately, as we've defined deviancy down, we should expect the overall mean of all the candidates to go down. And we're starting to see this with Mr. Trump, accusations of Mr. Moore, and so that's disconcerting to a large number of people, and we see the electoral result.
But, however, I think it could have a good effect on the Republican Party, possibly, if it forces them to reevaluate the kinds of people that they put forward as candidates.
Yeah, but I mean, are you kind of assuming the party has control over this? Well, I mean, it's so decentralized.
I know.
Roy Moore could thumb his nose at the whole establishment and say, I'm going to run and going to win.
But the local
sort of like Donald Trump did in the all of 2016.
I know, but the local committees, I think, are going to be forced to think about it for all the way up to the state committees. I think they're going to have to. They're going to have to address this. The Democrats are even having to address it somewhat.
Oh yeah.
So the game has changed a bit, I think, and I hope it's enough. I just don't know at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. We could be looking at a blip.
We could be.
I know this is a movement, but it's hard to know whether this is a long-term sort of thing.
What movement do you mean?
Let's say the Me Too movement, this sort of movement against sexual harassment, and movement against behaviors in the workplace, and it's all sort of get lumped together. But the Republicans, go ahead.
I don't think this is a blip. I think this is just simply a transformation of the culture. Yeah. Things that may have been tolerated and expected 30 years ago are coming to light now. Yeah. And I really think that's what's going on, that you've got a group of people that simply will not put up with it.
At least publicly.
Well, again, it's a very complex and deep. I think it's really deep-rooted and deep-seated in the way some industries are run. But I think it's on net. The Me Too thing is good that this stuff is being brought out to light, and I think that what happened with Roy Moore is part of that. Yeah.
But the one thing that we have to watch, though, is we've got to watch that movement itself doesn't go too far and start accusing. Well, it may already have done so. We don't know. Accusing people and trying people, if you will, in the public courts, not the judicial courts, but the public court of public opinion. Of things that they don't have any evidence for. So it's just easy to come up with an accusation.
Yeah.
We don't know yet.
Did you guys hear the story about the Republican state legislator in
Yes.
Kentucky who committed suicide over
sad.
allegations, it appears?
Yeah.
There's definitely going to be a pushback, and there's going to be a dark side to this in other ways, I think, that we probably can't predict. And I want to just follow up on what Jeff said. You said that for the Republicans, it sort of has played out a little bit differently than for the Democrats. Part of that's because the Republicans claim to care. Right, we claim to be the party that's against the sexual revolution, the more staid family values, conservative tradition, culture. So in that sense, I think it's perfectly appropriate that they're held to a slightly different standard in some ways.
Let me add on to that, because a lot of this pre-election kind of thing was, if Roy Moore is elected, what's this going to say about the Republican Party, and Christians support this kind, such that we're going to besmirch the cause of Christ, and we've heard some of that in our posters and so forth. Yep. Well, I see Nancy Pelosi and Barbara Boxer and many of these left-wing politicians proclaiming their faith or lack of faith. We see both Catholic and Jewish faith being proclaimed, and yet being staunchly, rabidly pro-abortion. No one thinks that somehow this means that the Catholic Church is all messed up because of their positions. There may be other reasons why people think that. So it seems to me that the American people, if Roy Moore would have been elected, will be able to ascertain, well, he's just a hypocrite in what he says. It doesn't necessarily, the people that do not like Christianity will, of course, say, see, this is what Christianity is all about. But I think in the broader context, people know that there are people that don't walk the talk.
We hope that's the case.
I mean, we see it on the left. Why would we expect that it would be radically different? And I think it gets back to what you're saying. Yeah. Because Republicans say they believe this, whereas nobody really believes the Democrats, when they say they're doing this, really care about that.
At least historically. Although you could argue right now we're looking at something of a difference, the Democrats, right? They're, at least on this particular issue, they're coming forward. Bill Clinton's getting routinely condemned.
He is now.
So there are lots of different things that we're just sort of witnessing as we walk through this. But just as a capper, I would say the Republican Party handled this about as badly as possible, in the sense that Donald Trump endorsed Moore, the RNC supported Moore, and then he lost. And so you get no benefit for the endorsement. You get all the costs attached to it.
Will they learn their lesson?
Will they learn their lesson? This gets back to our president's, I think, naivete when it comes to politics. He's just not quite up to speed in some ways. Maybe he doesn't listen to the right people.
But no one would have thought that Moore was going to lose. I mean, he thought he was betting on a sure thing.
But for a while, their polling was really tight.
I expected the people that were not, the polling I thought would all along not be true.
Yeah,
because people aren't going to say, of course I'm going to vote for the child molester, right? They're not going to do that to the polls. So I thought that they would come out anyway and looking at the issues, and they did not. I was surprised.
One more point about Moore really quick is that besides his potential moral turpitude, also, he was a kind of a kooky candidate regarding his views. A little bit gracious. Show a little grace. Show a little grace. Right?
But I think this is a really good point, because as our viewers can see, we're kind of like the rest of America. What we see is people's views on Roy Moore were already decided before this issue came, and that just kind of tended to reinforce kind of the expectation.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think having Donald Trump so close in our rearview mirror shaped those views as well. So, because my reactions to Trump have been the same as my reactions to Moore, and it just sort of all kind of goes together. So,
let me ask you guys a question. So I agree with what you're saying. I think that was just an issue that was used to sort of focus the ire. But why aren't we more perceptive about what a candidate says the candidate's going to do? I mean, that's what bothers me most about Trump. Again, is he just seems to me to be not much of what I thought a Republican was. And here we have Moore that comes off doing things. I think he was just using Christianity to a certain extent historically. Why don't we care about that?
I mean, we do, but this gets back to just standard public choice.
Was Luther Strange that bad in Alabama?
Well, in Alabama, they might have thought so. Right.
And there was an
That's the
accusation, right? There was an accusation that he had had some kind of illicit kind of support from the governor for some particular issue, and I don't remember all the facts, but there was some allegation. But in answer to your question, why don't we care about it? It's just rational ignorance. It really is. People don't know what most people are living their day. They're just going off and doing their business. They are not paying attention to politics. And so the short things that politicians can get out there, which is why you can talk this much better than I can. People are not going to be in tune to those subtleties. And that's why things, and this is the reason why I thought Moore would pull it off. That's why when Gloria Allred was found out to have falsified part of that signature on the back of that.
She did.
No, they added the
right.
But Allred claimed that it was all original.
Right.
And that gave, in a world of rational ignorance, people that distrust the media anyway. Well, I believe more now.
Right.
I mean, because people don't know. Most people don't pay nearly as much attention. I guarantee you, the people that vote pay a lot less attention than you viewers who are actually watching.
Yeah, and I would agree with that.
Great book on that, Against Democracy by Brennan, 2015. He compiles all the surveys that have been done on voter ignorance. It's abysmal.
Yeah.
so just completely abysmal.
Well, we probably need to move on.
Yeah.
I think what we're looking at is a failure of elites. And that's really the issue.
Oh, yeah.
Because typically, elite public opinion
forward.
moves in a way, then rank and file public opinion tends to follow it.
Yeah.
When elite public opinion is garbage, shockingly, rank and file public opinion gets garbage too. So our elites are doing us a disservice. Within Christianity, outside of Christianity, it's tragic, I think, but let's move on. Okay. All right, let's talk about net neutrality, something that I'll admit I really don't know all that much about. I don't know if collectively, if we know enough to fill a thimble on this issue. Dr. Clausen might pretend that he's an expert, we'll see. Dr. Clausen, get us up to speed on what is happening right now, even today, I think, on net neutrality.
Right now, the FCC has voted, I think it was 2-1?
3-2.
Our expertise is already
Sorry, it's already out the window. Right, sorry.
But you had the right majority.
Yeah, I had the right majority. It had to be one, right? We know to eliminate the framework of net neutrality rules that were implemented in 2015 by the Obama FCC. And net neutrality itself is a concept, which is, of course, worked out in regulations, that seeks to bring about equality among users. In pricing, in use, in speed, and anything having relevant to the use of the internet by internet providers to them. So that's the concept. The regulations were attempting to work that out, and the FCC voted to rescind all of that to make the internet essentially within the bounds of antitrust, anti-competitive statutes and regulations, a sort of a free market kind of situation or good. So that's the essence of it right there.
Bert, why don't you give us the case for, let's give the millennial case, because there's a lot of concern about this issue.
When you say net neutrality,
you look like a millennial, Bert.
When we talk about net neutrality, you're talking about everyone being treated equally.
Right.
So you're
Equality
saying moving a free market where there is a sense, of course, in which what you're saying is just factually accurate. But then again, in another sense, you're going to give the internet providers an opportunity to treat different users differently. So let's say Netflix is a user that I like. All right, so we watch Netflix. So what could happen is that if our internet provider decides that they don't like Netflix as much, they could slow Netflix down, or maybe could completely even block it. You know, and that's the kind of thing that I think is potentially out there. Now, we really, of course, don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Nothing much at all may happen. But the unfortunate reality is that free market that you're talking about is monopolized. You only have a couple of internet service providers.
I know.
Almost 2/3 of the nation only has one.
Arguably, because of government regulations. Look at Lincoln, Nebraska as a classic example. Because of the regulations that were very much like net neutrality, right? Almost the same thing on a micro scale, right? They went from 4 providers to 1. Nobody can afford to come into the market. Nobody can afford to compete, right?
And you think they'll be able to afford to compete now?
Absolutely,
I guess that's my question.
More will be drawn in. More will be drawn in.
There seem like the barriers to entry are so high, just technologically, that I don't know.
There's quite a few companies that can do this.
Comparative. I mean, they're high, absolutely, but they're not high comparatively.
But is it financially feasible for them to do it and make a profit?
In absolute terms, it might look like a very high entry barrier, but in comparative terms, it's not necessarily for a provider.
But if you're looking at, so let's say that my internet is delivered over a fiber optic line that's owned by, we'll just say AT&T. How can a small firm compete with that, with the cost of laying the fiber optic line?
They won't.
No, they'll
They
use
won't.
AT&T's fiber
Or
optic
use
line.
only Wi-Fi, but it won't be a
Wi-Fi.
small firm that does this competition. There
No,
are lots
small
of
firms are
larger
gone.
firms.
There are lots of larger
That's-
ones. They'll
that's
come
the
back
point.
in.
Again,
That's the point.
the
So-
point
so-
is not
into a given
So,
market.
so Heyman's Wi-Fi bill, I get it through the cable company, and so they called me up when my special deal was over, and they said, well, your introductory price is over, and your rate's gonna go up by 20%, and we just had the AT&T thing come into the neighborhood, and I says, no, it's not gonna go up. In fact, you're gonna cut my rates, and here's what you're gonna do. And he says, well, what's your address? And he looked up because I know he could see that there is this AT&T thing.
Yeah.
And then he agreed to re-up at the lower rate that I was negotiating on. So I think there are competitive forces out there. And there are
I've
companies
seen that
do
happen too, and I've watched it happen in cable and versus satellite, et cetera. But still,
Not only that-
you're going to have a lot of power in the hands of a relatively small group of firms.
But you're arguing static market. You're arguing a static market there, not a dynamic market created by these new conditions.
Now, again, we don't know what will happen. It's possible. I mean, technology is changing rapidly. One
That's
of the,
true, too, and that's
The
important.
person that hooked up our internet connection that we have now was probably 2 years ago, thought that what was going to happen is there would be these massive Wi-Fi.
But the government blocked that. That's what Obama blocked with the T-Mobile and somebody else's merger.
merger, yeah, that's right.
That would have had that conversation. So that
No,
gets back to your
what I'm
point.
talking about
that
is a
they're
technological thing where the internet is not delivered through a cable into your home, but literally you pick up your the thing that you'll be running into your router would come through the Wi-Fi as opposed
Yeah,
to
it's
having
like
a cable.
universal Wi-Fi.
Yeah, a big
Yeah.
set around.
Yeah.
That's what they
Yeah.
think was going, would be happening in the future.
Yeah.
So everything's speeding up. It's getting faster all the time. But I don't see this as being a good move. Maybe in the longer run, it might be. I think
there
you're
will
giving more power to
don't know.
big companies.
I think you're going to see incentives now for technology to move forward, even to eliminate this reliance upon fiber optics. Just eliminate that altogether. Bypass all of that.
And
Totally.
how do you bypass
I don't know yet. I haven't invented the technology.
This feels like a public utility to me.
It's
That's
not
why they're
public
doing
utility,
it.
though.
But here's
It's
the
not
thing.
like that.
Here's the thing. This is only changing Mr. Obama's regulations
Sure.
from 2 years ago.
Oh, right,
it's
right,
not
right.
like we had this
Right,
this thing that you
right.
were that was totally. Look where
Right.
we've
I
come from in the last
agree
10
with
years.
that.
Why
That's
would
fair.
we think that necessarily would have at that point just dropped off the rock through all this monopoly power?
I don't think anyone thinks it's going to drop off the rock. What
here's
they
a-
think is that in time, and it might be quickly, I would not think it would be, that some internet service providers will treat users differently.
They'll try. They may try
Well, they can do it.
temporarily, but when the competition begins to set in, over the intermediate and long term,
Yeah, we'll
you'll see
see.
changes
We'll
take
see.
place.
As we close, I would just like to point out to our viewers
close?
that the free marketers are on the right on this particular situation.
I think from their perspective, you're on the left.
I realize that. We're on the right.
We're really on the right.
I like free markets for the most part. But, yeah, okay. Anything else we want to bring up for the good of the cause?
We can wait till next
We
week.
can wait till next week, or whenever we get back together.
yeah,
we have
that's
going on
right.
Christmas
That's
break.
Probably
so-
next year, probably.
Next year, yeah. We'll see you next year for our
Merry
next
Christmas to
episode.
all of you.
Merry
Merry
Christmas to all of our legions of viewers, and
Happy
we'll
Advent.
catch you guys in the new year.